excuse me, is called FAT Online, right? FAT, Frame Assistant Tool. This is the first tool we're going to use. You can get this on your web browser, or you can get it on your phone. It is a mobile app. So you can get this on the Android, Google Play, and you can get this on iOS. And this is going to give us the frame data. So let me actually bring this up. Right, let me bring this up. Okay, so here we go. This is FAT. This is Frame Assistant Tool, right? Now, I'm using the web version, but you can get a version on your phone that's just as helpful. It's really good. I highly recommend getting the smartphone version of this. So you basically you can Google FAT, or you can, go to fullmeter.com, and here we can go to frame data, and it'll give us the ability to select a bunch of characters, but we're going to use Ken in most of these examples. So let's start with Ken, right? We have this big list, and there's a lot of things on this list. It's a lot to unpack, but let's break it down one thing at a time, and let's look at Ken's standing light punch, right? So we see that there's a startup, an active, recovery, on hit, on block, the type of move, the attack level of the move, and what it cancels into. These are all important. It also has other data like the damage and the stun and the command for the move. It also gives you any special notes, like, for example, Ken's standing light punch chain cancels, right? So this is comprehensive, pretty much as comprehensive as it gets. This is an excellent tool. Another tool you can use is the Nani? You need to log in for this. So anyway, the Capcom website for Street Fighter V has the frame data for all of the characters. Now, I will say there are some inaccuracies on this website. So you can go to game.capcom.com/CFN, or you can just look up Capcom Street Fighter V frame data, and you'll have to log in to their website to view the frame data, but you can get it here as well if you don't want to go through the hassle of downloading an app. But I highly recommend FAT. If you're looking just for Ken specific frame data, the Ken guide has all of Ken's frame data, all of it, in the reference section of the Ken guide. It even has his V-trigger cancels and his V-skill cancels on hit and block. But for now, we're gonna use FAT. This is by far the most useful tool. This is the most useful tool. How does Capcom mess up frame data? Your guess is as good as mine, but they do. Somehow. So FAT is by far the most useful tool. What's up, Abby Ace? I see you, man. What's good? So we're going to start with FAT. Now, we see there's all these columns here, right? Startup, active, recovery. And these have numbers of frames, right? And these numbers correspond to how many frames of animation a move takes, right? So this is true for Street Fighter and almost every single 2D game. I'm pretty sure it's true for every 2D fighter, and even 3D fighters, just fighters in general. They usually run at a locked frame rate of 60 frames per second, right? So if we go here, we can see that, actually, let me cut this music. Excuse me. We can see that when Ken does light punch, right? He animates, of course, right? So our move is an animation. This is a character model animating. And fighting games are locked usually at 60 frames per second. There are some weird exceptions, but for the most part, all fighting games run at 60 frames per second, which means that if this was like, a cartoon or, a strip of film or like an anime or something like that, there'd be one still image every 1/60th of a second, right? 60 frames per second is what we're animating at, right? The game is running at 60 frames per second. So whenever we do a move, the frames of animation, right, happen in some variation, some portion of those 60 frames within the second, right? That's how we measure moves in fighting games. We measure them by the frames, and there's 60 frames per second. That's pretty much all you need to know to get a general idea of frame data. Is everything is basically out of 60, and 60 is 1 second. This is going to give us like a good reference for this, speed and stuff like that. So we know 60 frames per second. So let's go back to our frame data here, right? So we see that Ken's startup is 4, right? The startup of Ken's light punch is 4. This means that out of 60, this takes 4, right? This takes 4 frames to start up. So if we were able to play this frame by frame, and you can do that by watching a replay or watching a recording. Here, I'm just going to slow the game down. Hopefully this tool works. I'm going to slow the game down, and we can see the startup of this move. You see when he starts to bring his arm up, right, before he's fully extended? This is the startup of this move, and this takes 4 frames, right? This is a relatively fast move. It's not the fastest move in Street Fighter, but it's relatively fast. The fastest moves in Street Fighter are generally 3 frames, normal attacks. However, there are some characters with 1 frame attacks, but those are usually special attacks like supers and command grabs. Zangief has a 1 frame super. Akuma has a 1 frame command grab and Raging Demon, which I guess you could count as a super. So this move takes 4 frames to start up. So before this move will even hit Ryu, right? If we very slowly go over here to hit Ryu, there will be 4 frames of animation before he gets hit. You see how Ken's arm starts moving before Ryu takes damage? There are 4 frames before Ryu gets touched. That's the startup of a move. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's how long that move takes to start up. All right. So now the second category here is active frames, right? Now the active frames are the amount of frames where a move deals damage, right? So you see how Ryu's getting hit and he takes some damage, right? So we start up with 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 60, right? And then we hit the active frames, and for 2 frames, we are able to deal damage. So 1, 2, right? We're able to deal damage. That's the active frames here. That's while we're dealing damage. Now, the recovery frames are, again, pretty self-explanatory. Is how long it takes Ken to recover, right? And during this whole duration, during the startup, the active, and the recovery, right? So we cannot control the character. Once we input a command, we cannot control our character. We can't do anything else. So if we whiff this move, while it's going, we can't move. Look at the inputs here, right? I'm going to press jab, and for the entire duration of this move, the active, the startup, and the recovery, I will not be able to move Ken left or right. So I'm going to press jab and attempt to move him right away. You see how he doesn't move? It takes all the way until the move is done recovering for us to control our character again, right? So just to go over that quickly once again, these are pretty self-explanatory, but to be thorough, the startup of a move is how long it takes to start up. That's how long it takes to get to the active frames. The active frames of a move are how the duration of when it can deal damage. The recovery is how long it takes for that move to recover after we throw it out. And this whole time, when we throw out a move, especially on whiff, I mean, there are some circumstances where we can do other things, like we'll get to those later, but we cannot control our character. We've committed to this action, right? No matter how much we try to move, until we've recovered, we cannot control our character, right? Now, when a move hits an opponent, when we touch an opponent with our active frames, there's two things that could happen. They could get hit or they could block, right? If we hit them, they go into what's called hit stun. This is hit stun. Or reeling animation. You'll hear some people call it reeling, or some people will also call it hit stop, right? This is hit stun. Every move you do does a certain amount of hit stun, a certain number of frames. So this puts Ryu in hit stun for a certain amount of frames. If the move is blocked, it puts him in block stun for a certain amount of frames. While this is happening, if Ryu attempts to do something, he cannot. He is locked in to this animation. So if we were Ryu here and we tried to move while we were in block stun, we could not. Right? The same thing with hit stun. Now, when we land a move on hit or block, there are the number of frames of hit stun, and then there's our recovery. If the number of frames of hit stun or block stun is greater than the number of frames on our recovery, that means that the opponent will be stuck. They will be stuck while we can take action. Do you see this? You see how I'm going to hit Ryu, and then I'm going to move Ken backwards. And Ken is going to be able to move before Ryu is done reeling. Right? So he's in hit stun. I'm now attempting to move backwards. Look at that. You see before Ryu has returned to neutral, I'm able to move. You can also see up top, there are the frame bars in the Street Fighter UI. You can see that I'm able to act, my bar depletes before his bar depletes. In this case, there are 5 frames which I can act before Ryu can act. This means that I am plus, right? I am plus 5. I can take action 5 frames before Ryu can, because he is stuck in the hit stun frames. This is the same for block. The blocking will have different values for most moves most of the time, but the principle is the same. So if I get Ryu to block here, we'll see that instead of 5 frames to act first, I have 2 frames to act first, right? So this is plus or minus. What that means when someone says, "Oh, this move is plus" or "this move is minus," it means that I hit you with my move, right? You enter block stun or hit stun, and you are stuck in that stun for a certain amount of frames. That stun will be less than the recovery of my move by a certain amount. It depends on every move has a different number of plus or minus. But I will be able to act first. If the hit stun or block stun is less than the recovery of my move, you will be able to act first, right? So here I'm plus 2, which means that for 2 frames, right, 2 frames of animation, and these are measured at 60 frames per second, I am able to act before Ryu does. So I, as Ken, am plus, right? If I do a move that is, say, minus, right, this move will be minus 4. This means that Ryu recovers from his block stun. His block stun is over 4 frames before my move is. So he can act first. Ryu is plus, right? It's this similar for when you knock an opponent down, right? Like here, I'm gonna very slowly throw Ryu. And for this throw, he will be stuck in this hit. This is technically a hit stun animation. It's just special for throws, right? He's stuck in the getting hit animation. For a certain amount of frames, I will be able to act before he does. All right, so here I'll throw him again. We'll see that for a certain amount of frames, I'm able to act first. This is plus. On hit, this throw is plus, right? It's the same principle as when I hit jab. Ryu is locked into that animation while I am not. I may not be very plus, but it's still plus, right? It's the same for all moves. So this move is plus on block. I'm able to act first. This move is minus on block. My opponent is able to act first, right? And remember, these frames we're measuring frames. There's 60 frames per second, and we're measuring frames. So each frame is 1/60th of a second amount of time. That might seem kind of difficult to like, well, how am I supposed to just know 1/60th of a second? If you play enough fighting games, you'll get a general feel for it. You'll get a general feel. It's very much an experience thing. It's not as difficult as it sounds. So, every move has a startup. It's when it's starting, an active when it can hit the opponent when it deals damage, and a recovery. Every move also has a certain amount of hit stun and block stun, and these are all measured in frames. There's certain amounts of frames of animation that these moves take. And we measure those 60 frames a second. Let me turn on the hitbox viewer so we can better illustrate this point. Now we see here, all right. Let's demonstrate this with Ken's fireball. We see here. Let's look at our frame data reference. Where is Ken's Hadouken? Here we go. Light punch, fireball. We see that this move has... Actually, let's talk about the jab first. Let's look at the jab first. This will better demonstrate our concept again, right? So we can see the active frames here is when this move is red. You see that red box? That's the active frames. Let me slow this down even more. Let's slow this down even more. Okay. So Ken will be starting up, right? You see him start the jab. This takes 4 frames. You see him starting up, and then that red box appears. That's what deals the damage. If that touches Ryu, it will put him in hit stun or block stun, right? So we see the startup, the active frames, that lasts for 2 frames, and then the recovery. And now looking at our reference here, we know that we have 4 startup, 2 active, and 7 recovery, right? Now, we know that if we touch Ryu, say on block, right? So Ryu's blocking, let's move over there and we'll touch him. We know that we put him in block stun for more frames than our recovery is. So this is plus, will be plus, right? So we see that on block, we're +2, right? That is also what our reference says. See, on block, we're +2. And if we hit Ryu, we'll be +5, right? Now, we know that our active frames are 2. An important thing to know here is that to make it easier for the developers to put together movesets, and also it makes it easier for players to put together combos, the last startup frame is your first active frame, right? So this move takes 4 to start up. So it will go 1, 2, 3, 4. And on 4, the last startup frame, it will be an active frame. So that 4th frame is when that red appears. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? These are the startup. And then it goes 1, they overlap, 2. So these are the active, and this is the startup. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, then 1 at the same time, 2. that is important to note when you're setting up Okazeme and things like that. That's a little bit more advanced, but you need to know that. So the last startup frame is the first active frame, right? So we see that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. We're +2 on block. We go through our recovery 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we still have 2 frames to move here, right? Now, if you imagine these like blocks, like, you know, chunks of like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, 2. If we were able, we put Ryu in the block stun, right? If we were able to hit Ryu on this frame, right, this second active frame, you got to imagine there's all those block stun frames down here and the recovery frames, right? Imagine that there are recovery frames down here. If we're able to hit Ryu here, right, we can essentially skip going through these 2, right? So if we hit Ryu on our last active frame here, if we, instead of hitting him on the first one, if we hit him on the last one, instead of being +2, we would be +3, because it's going to put him in the same amount of block stun no matter what, right? So we touch Ryu, he's always going to go through the same amount of block stun. That's for all of our moves, right? All of our normal moves. Most moves in the game will function this way. There are some rare exceptions. But when you touch the opponent, hit or block, they always go through the same stun animation, hit stun or block stun. And we are always going to go through the same recovery animation. But, I accidentally did a throw there. If we're able to hit them 1 frame later, right? So instead of hitting him on 1, if we hit him on 2 here, instead of being +2 on block, we'd be 1 frame ahead on the recovery, right? So instead of hitting him on frame 1, if we hit him on frame 2, we would be +3 on block, right? So I have a image to share that really demonstrates this point a lot better than I could explain it. Let me bring it up for us. Let's bring up this image real quick. Let's bring up our image. Here we go. So this animation explains it much better than the finger method, right? So we know that. So this is a moving image, a GIF or a GIF, depending on where you're from, how you like to pronounce that. We see that the frame data listed for this move that this character is performing has 2 startup, right? And we know that the startup here is the last startup frame is the first active frame, right? And when we touch our opponent with an active frame, they will always go through the same amount of stun recovery, right? So if this move hits on the last active frame, right, Ryu starts his stun animation, right? So this move is +4 on hit when we hit off this first frame, right? But if we hit off of this second frame, we could essentially move all of these numbers 1 over, right? We can move all of these blocks 1 over, and it would be +5, right? That is what I was attempting to describe when I was using my fingers here, right? So we know that this stun recovery is the same every time. It doesn't matter what active frame we hit them with. So when we hit them with an active frame later, a later active frame, one that's further down the line here, we get more plus frames, right? So we know that this is similar. This move is +2 on block, and it has 2 active frames. So if we were able to hit on the second one, we would be +3. And there are many ways to do that. And when you hit with a move that is in the late active frames, if we hit this on the last active frame, or this on the last active frame, or this on the last active frame, that is called meaty. Fighting game players refer to that as a meaty move. That is the technical definition of a meaty move, is hitting in the later active frames, right? So if you have a move with multiple active frames like this one, right, we can see, boop, 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 there's a lot of active frames there. The later we hit in this move, the more meaty it is, right? The more meaty it is. Let's look at a really easy example of that, and that is a fireball, right? So let's look at the frame data for Ken's fireball. FA Tool is a great resource, highly recommended. Ken's fireball has 14 startup, and it has no listed active frames? What does this mean? And it has 34 frames of recovery. It is -2 on hit and -8 on block. And these are measured, these on hit and on blocks are measured hitting them at the soonest possible time. So if this move is not done meaty on block, it should be -8. Let's find out. Let's walk up to Ryu so we can hit him as soon as possible, and let's see. So this fireball should be -8. That's -8. There we go. Right at the very end there, it says -8. We can see that Ryu will have 8 frames to act before we can act. Because we are -8, he is +8. He exits his block stun 8 frames before we exit our recovery. And we know that when you're doing a move, you're committed to that move. You cannot control your character while that move is happening. You have to wait for the recovery to be over. However, if we back up really far away, Fireball will stay on the screen, right? And the whole time it's on the screen, it will be able to hit him, right? It has a hitbox. It will hit. It has active frames. So we can see that our Fireball has a variable amount of active frames. You see the hitbox here? The longer this is out, we're still recovering. So if this hits him from very far away, it will be very, very meaty, which means that we will be very, very plus. You see how we're so plus we can just jump right now? Right? We may not be able to jump into him, but we have so many active frames there. Right? This move is super duper meaty from far away. So even though up close we're minus, because there's so many active frames on this move, technically there's infinite amount of active frames on this move. If you could have like an infinite length stage, this move would just keep going, if I could do it. And it would be ultra meaty. Right? That's how meatying a move works. The more active frames you have, essentially, it allows you to create opportunities where you hit that move late. You hit it on the later active frames. Ideally, you would hit on the last one. And that puts them into the preset amount of block or hit stun. And the preset amount of block or hit stun is the same for every move, pretty much. There are some very, very rare exceptions. But pretty much when you hit a move, it's going to make them have a certain preset amount of block stun or hit stun, and that's not going to change. So if we can hit this in the later active frames, essentially, practically, we can kind of shortcut our recovery. We're already recovering. We're recovering, still boom, recovery is done, and our active frames are still out there, right? And then it hits him, he's going to go through the same number of block stun frames. So this move is super meaty, which allows us to do some unique things, right? Those are meaty attacks, right? That's the same thing with this move. It has multiple active frames. The later we hit it, the more plus we are, right? The same thing with jab, stand short, any move, any character. The later you hit that move, the more plus you're going to be. That's a meaty attack. When you hit it on the very last frame, when you do it ultra perfectly, that's most people will refer to that as a perfect meaty. That's a perfect meaty attack. But if you hit anywhere after the first active frame, that's just a meaty attack. The easiest place to hit meaty attacks, the easiest way to set up a meaty attack is when you knock your opponent down. When you go for Okazeme, that is the easiest time to get a meaty attack. And once again, a meaty attack is any attack that hits after it comes into contact with the opponent after the first active frame. And what that does is it sticks them in the same amount of recovery, but you will be 1 or 2 or 3, or depending on how many active frames you've already gone through, you'll be that many frames faster to your recovery. So essentially, you can make yourself more plus, right? And that's why Fireball is really, really plus from far away, but can be minus from up close. Now, we know about meaties. We know about startup. We know about recovery. We know about active. We know about on hit. And we know about on block. I think we're ready to move over to talking about hitboxes. Now that we have a general understanding of frame data. Okay. I have a tool running called FTV Hitbox Viewer. It's Frame Trapped Hitbox Viewer. Yo, what's up, old school reflexes? Yeah, man, if you guys have any questions, anybody chilling in the chat, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer them. Let's talk about hitboxes. I'm using a tool to show these hitboxes called FTV Hitbox Viewer. Frame Trapped Hitbox Viewer. It is a really, really great tool. It does a lot more than just show you the hitboxes. It can show you all sorts of other information, like the size. It can show you the distance between the opponents. It can slow the game down or speed the game up. That's what I'm using to display this in slow motion. It can show you all sorts of stuff. It gives you a frame count, right? So every 1 second, this number will go up by 60, right? Because this game is running at 60 frames per second. And it can even tell you frame data by talking to you in a robotic voice. So if I touch this guy, it should say something. This tool is super useful. You can just Google Frame Trapped Hitbox Viewer and find out all about that. The developer is super cool, member of the FGC. If you feel so inclined, you could contact them on Twitter. I haven't really talked to them or anything, but this is just an invaluable resource. So let's use this to talk about hitboxes. As you can see, Ken and Ryu are not actually Ken and Ryu shaped. This game, and all 2D fighting games, and 3D fighting games to an extent, but they function differently. 2D fighting games are played on a flat plane, right? They're played on a flat plane. So this is 2D. Even though Ken and Ryu look 3D, they're not 3D shaped for all intents and purposes. You see these squares and rectangles that they're outlined in? This is Ken and Ryu. This is how this is happening. Ken and Ryu can frame trap be used during online matches? Yes, but I don't recommend it. One, because it could slow your game down intermittently. You could have some sort of hiccup. Two, it would take away from the fun and the skill of playing. If you can see everything going on and the distances, it takes away from the skill. It's essentially like cheating. It's not like big cheating, but it's just not good form. You could use it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would only recommend using this tool offline. You see these squares and rectangles that Ken and Ryu are made out of? This is the space they're occupying on a 2D plane, right? So if I get really close, you see how their feet overlap, right? There's no collision there, right? Ken and Ryu are not touching each other. So for all intents and purposes, the models, the character models, these 3D models that look so nice, Capcom, these are hollow. And over top of those, on a 2D plane, are these squares and rectangles. And these determine the collision of your characters, right? So you see this blue outlined yellow box here. This is the collision box in the center of the characters, right? So until these blue lines are touching, the characters can pass over each other. But once these touch, the characters collide. You see how Ken is pushing Ryu now, right? That is the collision box of the characters. This prevents them from walking through each other, right? But to a certain extent, until these touch, we can cross over. Like their knees are crossed over, their legs are crossed over, right? The 3D models are actually just for show. They're just to make it look pleasant. The characters are actually 2D, like sets of collision boxes on a 2D plane. This green box here is the hurt box. This is the hurt box. This is where your character can get hurt, right? So if we do a move like Ken's standing jab, which has 4 frames of startup, 2 active frames, and 7 frames of recovery, we'll see that this move summons up or changes Ken's hurt boxes. You see how when he does this move, his hurt box is changed until the recovery is over. You see the startup here? You see how he has that additional green box on his front leg and around his arm? Those are the hurt boxes of this normal attack, right? So this normal attack has some hurt boxes on it. This is where Ken can get hit, right? This red box appears on his active frames. So this move is active for 2 frames, which means that if we ran this game at full speed, 60 frames per second, it would be almost instantaneously there and then gone again. Let's speed the game up and look at real time. So we know that he's got 2 active frames. Look at how fast that is. It's basically there and not again. This is a 4-frame startup move, 4 frames of startup, then that red box appears, stays for 2 frames, and then it disappears, and 7 frames it takes him to recover. Right? That red box is the hit box. That is the hitbox of the move. So this is when Ken can deal damage. If that red box overlaps with Ryu's green box, if a hitbox overlaps with a hurt box, someone gets put in hit stun or block stun, right? So if Ryu blocks this move, he will get hit with block stun, right? This red box determines the range of our move, right? So we can see that until we overlap that red with that green, Ryu will not be in block stun. But the moment we overlap that red and green, the moment our active frames come up and our hitbox appears, if it overlaps with one of Ryu's hurt boxes, he will get put in block stun or hit stun, depending on if he's blocking or not, right? So if Ryu is not blocking, he gets put in hit stun, right? He's locked into that animation. How can you tell what is counter-pokeable due to hurt boxes and hit boxes? We're getting there. We will get there in one moment. That's where this is all leading, right? So you guys see that when the red overlaps the green, that's when hit stun or block stun happens, right? But now let's talk about let's address this yellow box that appears. You see this yellow box, right? This is how Street Fighter, it's not like this for all 2D games. For most games, it's similar, but this is how Street Fighter determines whether or not holding back will make you block, right? So we can see that this yellow box is not overlapping any of Ryu's boxes, so he's standing normal. But if Ryu was holding backwards, like in a match, to block, when that yellow box overlaps, he goes into blocking, right? He's not in block stun or hit stun, right? He's blocking from what we call the proximity box. This is the proximity guard box, right? So if this yellow box is close to him, he is within proximity of our move for the game to enable him to block, right? This is a control thing. This is important in neutral, because sometimes you're going to want to back up and not block. But if this yellow box overlaps you, you will get caused to block. Right? This is a proximity guard box. This is when people talk about like, oh, I was stuck in proximity guard, or this move caused proximity guard from this far away. This is what they're talking about. This yellow box is proximity guard. So he is now enabled to block. Right? You see how he can block? That also happens if we're super duper close. It just happens. And then we hit him and he's blocking, right? So he's stuck in block stun now. This happens with all moves. Generally, you want to think cleverly about your proximity guard and the shape of your move, right? So let's look at our jab again. We see that the green stays a little while after our active frame disappears. This means that we can get hit right there, right? So normally, we're chilling, right? We're chilling. We got our normal hurt box on. We're chilling. We're mad skinny. We're as skinny as we're going to get. We're sucking it in here, right? Ryu can't. I mean, what's he going to touch us with? Fireball? I mean, come on. You know? But if we stick out our jab, look how much more green we exposed. We can get hit there. So for this duration of this move, the recovery here, we can get hit, and we can't move, and we can't block, because we're locked into our frames of animation, right? We have to go through 4 startup, 2 active, and 7 recovery. So this green out here is vulnerable, right? We could be with punished, right? We could be with punished because we're extending our hurt box by doing this move, even on the legs here, right? So when we talk about poking and counter poking and with punishing, when we talk about those, we can use the hitboxes, a clever knowledge of hitboxes, to better inform how we go about that, right? Let's look at an example here. Let me speed the game up to full speed so we can record something, and then we'll play it back slow. Let's look at Ryu's crouching medium kick, right? our boy Ryut is going to perform his crouching medium kick. Now, you will have to have a general knowledge of what your character's hitboxes and hurtboxes look like to figure this out fast, right? But let's slow this down and look at this move. Let's say Ryu is doing crouching medium kick all day, and we want to know how to get around it, right? Well, we know that it has some startup frames, some active frames, and some recovery frames. We also know, now looking at the hitboxes, we can see the hitbox. Look at where Ryu is vulnerable. He's vulnerable for all of this green area, right? This is his hurt box. He even has a hurt box extended before and after the red appears. So for his startup, a little tiny bit of his startup and a lot of his recovery, right? During those frames, he's got an additional hurt box going. And we can also see that the proximity guard here, you see that yellow box? That's going to force us to block, right? Hey, what's up, Spider-Man? I see you. So let's say we're playing neutral, right? We're playing the footsies, and we want to get around this move. Well, we know that if we try to walk backwards, generally at this distance, we're not going to get hit, but it's going to stick us in place because we'll be stuck blocking, right? So if we enter this proximity guard distance, right, our green overlaps with that yellow right there, and we try to move, we're just going to get stuck. We're just going to block, right, until it's over. So, okay, we're not really in any danger there. And we know that, looking at his hitbox, it doesn't really go that far. So we can use this to determine the range of this move. So just looking at this, I would say that I'm able to stand where Ryu's foot goes into my foot and not get hit. Right? We can stand like right here. Look at this. I'm sure you guys have seen all the memes of Street Fighter where it's like somebody's hitting someone, like they're overlapping, right? But Ryu's hurt box is big and his hitbox is so small, right? So let's say we wanted to counter poke this move, right? Let's say we wanted to counter poke this move. We want to go at the same time, and we want to pick a move that has a good chance of hitting Ryu out of this, or if we hit him at the same time, we want to win, right? So the first and most obvious way to do that is by looking at the shape of our hitboxes and hurt boxes. We want something that will hit red in this general area, and we don't want any green to go into his red. So let's look at our moves. Let's use the hitboxes of our moves to figure this out. This is the shape of our moves. So when someone says to you like, "Oh, that move doesn't have a good shape," or "that move it's not shaped right to counter poke or hit that," this is what they're talking about, right? So let's look at our crouching jab. Will this counter poke his crouching medium punch? It might. It has red that's kind of low. We could use this from far away, but we have to add more. We have to think practically. What do we get off of our jab? Is that going to be super optimal? It's going to be hard to hit. Right now we're in slow motion, but this move these are hard to hit. These are fast moves, right? If we do them at the same time, it might counter poke him. But there's another feature to Street Fighter V, and this is in some 2D fighting games, like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, and some other 2D games, but not in every game, called move priority, right? It's called a priority system. Basically, what that means, if these red boxes overlap, right? If for some reason we accidentally get red over his red, right? Our active frames hit at the same time, we overlap. Medium level attacks will just win. So the game will decide, like, okay, both of these collision boxes are over top of each other, right? The hit boxes have overlapped hurt boxes simultaneously on the same frame. The game just goes, okay, did someone use a medium? they win if the other person used the light. So higher moves beat lower moves. So lights are defeated by mediums. Mediums beat lights. Heavies beat mediums, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe throws beat all normals, and special moves have the highest priority unless they are throw invulnerable. Right? So throws should beat everything unless it's specifically throw invulnerable. Right? So let's continue with our medium kick example. We probably could use jab because it has a good shape. Right? Maybe it's a little too high. What else? Maybe down medium punch. Right? That has a good shape. We could use our down medium punch here. But we want to be careful because if we're going to counter poke him, we're going to go for a poke at the same time. We're still going to try to take the initiative. We're going to need to use something with the same level of priority because we're playing Street Fighter V, right? So our down light kick can hit him, right? Let's look at the shape of that move. This is probably one of our better options. All right, let's look at it. Look at where our red is. Our red is right where we want it to be. This move has a good shape for defeating Ryu's crouch medium kick. Look at the position of our hitbox. That's going to go right into his hurtbox. But we have to remember that if we're going to counter poke this move, which means we're going to take the initiative and either go before Ryu goes or at the same time, right? If we hit on the same active frames, it's a little bit tricky to time, but during a real match, you'll find that this happens a lot. If we hit during the same active frames, he'll win. You see that? Because he has priority, right? That's just something to know about Street Fighter V. But generally, like if this was Street Fighter 4, this would be a great move to counterpoke that move with because it's got the red. So, okay, our hurt box is down low, right? That's why this is a dangerous move to use versus that because we have a light move that has the hurt box down low. You see how our green is low enough for him to clip it with his red, right? That initial green there. So this would say, okay, we want to counter poke. We want to counter poke. This is not the move to go for, right? Because there's a chance he could get us. So we got to find a way to get to his green while avoiding his red, right? That's basically what we want to try to do. So we're just going to look at all of our moves to find the shape of our moves and see what we can do, right? It would seem that Ken, his standing roundhouse, look at that. That doesn't have any green down low. This will go over lows. If you were playing like Tekken, they would say that this move low crushes. In Street Fighter, we'd say that this has either high profile, we'd say probably high profile, or just beats lows, right? So the move we want to counter poke here with, just looking at the shape as a move, is probably standing roundhouse because it's going to just completely go over all of that red area, and we can put our red on his green without taking any risk. That would be for counter poking if we want to try to take the initiative and go first, right? But let's say we don't want to counter poke Ryu. We have a good idea of when he's going to do this, right? We know our spacing. We've done a little bit of a wiggle. We walked in and walked out. We baited him to do this move, and we want to whiff punish it. You see how during his recovery frames, there's the green hurt box there, right? We can put red into that if we are fast enough, and we have a move that will hit that area, right? We have active frames that will go to that area. Then Ken's standing light kick would probably be a good move to whiff punish this with, right? So even though this move is not really great for counter poking medium attacks because it's a light move, you could, but it presents a little bit of a risk because of the priority system. This move is excellent for whiff punishing. You see how long, right? Boom, his active frames are over. Oh, time to hit my light kick. Oop, I did a little slow there. But you see how I'm able to whiff punish him, right? Even though I'm like ultra far away. I could probably do it from even a little bit further out. Hit the recovery of this move. So let's see. Still, we can do it from further back still. All we need to do is to get our red active frames, our hitbox there, to overlap his hurtbox. It even goes from there. You see how far away that is? So by looking at the shape of these moves, we can determine, okay, so maybe it's not a good idea to try to counterpoke with this move or go first. Because if he uses a medium and we're even slightly mistimed, he'll just beat us. But if he whiffs this move and we're ready for him to whiff, this is an okay move to hit this with, right? That is the fundamental process you'll go through to determine what is a good whiff punish, what is a good counter poke, what is a good whiff punish or a good counter poke in any given situation. And you can do that way, way faster by just having a working knowledge of what your character's hitboxes and hurtboxes look like, right? So, for example, I'm sure we've all seen that famous Daigo clip where Arturo Sanchez, T.S. Sabin, does like yoga arms and Daigo does like down fierce into Ryu Street Fighter 4 Super, right? That is a whiff punish. And the reason that worked is because of these hitboxes and hurtboxes. If we were able to look at Dhalsim's limbs right now, I'm not going to go through all the effort to load it up, but we would see that like Ryu here, his green extends past the red, and it lingers for a little while his move is in recovery frames, right? So he has a lingering hurtbox. That's what enabled that to happen, even from really, really far away. Just similar to that, right? We're putting our hitbox over their hurtbox. So this move would be good to whiff punish, but not very good to counter poke with, because if we hit at the same time, I would lose because of priority and because my green area would overlap his red area if we did this at the same time. So in other games, we would get a trade, but in Street Fighter V, if we hit simultaneously, he just wins. This is kind of tricky to time. Tricky to time, but if I do it right, I can demonstrate this property of Street Fighter V. I'm not doing a very good job of this. There we go. Yeah. If we did two medium attacks, like if we both did medium kick, we would trade. There. Ooh, he hit me first. I hit him first. Anyway, you guys get the point. I'm not gonna bore you by trying to thread the needle in this demonstration. I'm sure you've seen trades happen in matches before, in your matches and in other matches. So just to go over that really quickly again, if we're looking for a counter poke, we want to find a move that will not put us in danger of getting touched by their hitbox, right? So this red area on Ryu's kick is the hitbox. When we counterpoke, we're going at the same time or we're going first. And we're just picking a move that has a good shape and is somewhat designed to go and beat this move, right? And for Ken, that happens to just be his standing roundhouse. So if these moves come out at the same time, Ken's standing roundhouse will not only beat Ryu because of Street Fighter V's priority system, but if we look at the shape of it, we're not in any danger of his red hitting our green, where our red can hit his green. You see that? You see how this move just totally avoids Lowe's attacks? That's for a counter poke. To whiff punish, to whiff punish him, instead of targeting these frames, the startup frames and the active frames, we're going to target his recovery frames. We're going to wait for him to miss this move. We're going to wait for him to whiff, be ready for it, and then we just need to find a move that has a shape that will come into contact with this here, this lingering hurt box. Let me actually pause the game to show this. There we go. So this is during his recovery frames. If we're whiff punishing, we're trying to target this here. And because he doesn't have any active frames out, it doesn't necessarily really matter, right, what our move shape is. So we can use our standing leg kick to do that, but we cannot use our standing leg kick to punish this. Let's speed the game back up. So basically what you do is you find a resource that shows all the hitboxes and hurtboxes for your character, and you look and you just get an idea of how this move goes. In the same way you learn what your character's special moves do, you learn what their hitboxes and hurtboxes do. And this is going to arm you so well to figure out how to go about fighting other characters' moves. Because then all you'll need to do is see their hitboxes and hurtboxes, and you'll go, oh, I can use my move, which has this, because I've internalized it, I've memorized it, to hit that. So for example, I know that Ken's stand light kick is not very good for counter poking lows, but it's good for whiff punishing lows. And I know that his stand roundhouse is pretty good for counter poking lows, but not very good for whiff punishing lows because it has slow startup, right? It takes a long time for this move to reach active frames. Let's look at our frame data resource and actually find out. Ken's standing hard kick, standing roundhouse, 14 startup. 14 startup. So we know that the last startup frame is also the first active frame. So it takes at minimum 13 frames, 13 out of 60 frames, so 13/60ths of a second for this move to hit something. So if I want to counter poke, this is probably not a good idea because it's slow, right? That's what makes this move slow. There's a lot of frames of animation in the startup. It takes a long time to come out. And when we say come out, we mean get to its active frames where this red hitbox appears. So this is not super good for counter poking. I mean, this is not super good for whiff punishing because it's not very fast. It's hard to react. It's hard to thread the needle with this move because we have to do it so early, right? But this move is fast. It only has 4 startup, but its shape, the shape of this move, is not very good for counter poking because it's vulnerable where it can deal damage. This move is also vulnerable for lows. That's basically the process you go through, right? You go, oh, okay, let me look at the shape of this move, right? That's how we can get things like punishing sim limbs. Actually, let me load up sim. Let me load up sim and demonstrate that just for extra additional clarity. I'm gonna load up Dawson here real quick. Dawson. Where are you, Dawson? Here you are. So, just to cap off our discussion on how to figure out what is a good counter poke and what is a good whiff punish, we can look at the shapes of moves. Right? So let's look at, I think it's just standing. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Dawson is just going to do this over and over again. And let's take a look at it. See, there it is. I don't know how to work these. There's a spaceship up in here. There we go. Okay. So now let's slow it down. Let's slow it down to get a better look at this move. You can also look up still images of this. You could just Google search Street Fighter V hitboxes if you're so inclined. Look at this. So wait a minute. This move is actually not that that crazy to deal with at all, right? Look at where his hitbox is. His hitbox is always outside of his. His hitbox is always inside of his hurtbox. This move is actually extremely vulnerable, right? So it is a heavy move though, so we have to be careful if we get hit with that red part, right? So say for example, it would look like using standing light kick would be a pretty decent option versus if it whiffs. Boink. Right? Because we hit our red onto that green. So you see how Dhalsim reels back even though we're like infinity space between each other? Alright, he gets locked into that hit stun because one of my hitboxes touched his hurt box. This move has a lot of recovery on it too. We can see how the hurt box lingers, right? This is also the shape of your move and how long the recovery is and how long the hurt box on your move lingers around. This is going to determine what makes your move a good poke, right? This is going to determine what makes your move a good poke. What about the jab? Okay, we'll look at that in a moment. You see how this move has a lot of startup? The shape of it is not very good, right? The shape of it is not very good. He has no red outside the green. It's all vulnerable. It doesn't go as far as it looks. The proximity block box doesn't force me to stand still from very far away, right? This move almost has no advantages going for it, except that it low profiles Sim. You see how he ducks down here? This low profiles him, right? So that's the advantage of this move. But as a poke, applied as a poke, this move is not very strong. It's slow, doesn't have a good hitbox, hurtbox, lingers around forever, right? Makes him vulnerable from super far away. So you can this is an example of a very weak poke. However, Street Fighter is not so cut and dry. There's other utility to this move. So when you see a move that has like a crappy hurtbox or hitbox, it probably has some other type of advantage. Like it may be very plus on hit, or it may offer a unique combo opportunity, or it may low profile, right? Like if I do a fireball here and Dhalsim times his hard punch properly, he'll go under my fireball. I think he's going to recover into it because I did my fireball at the wrong time. But if Dhalsim times his hard punch properly, he should slip right underneath this fireball. Let me try it again. Now this fireball extends my hurt box on my feet. So this is a move you want to be careful about doing the lows. Let's talk about Sim's jab, and then we'll talk about the other types of hitboxes and hurtboxes, because they're not only red and green and proximity boxes. There are also different categories, different classes of hitboxes and hurtboxes. Let's look at Sim's jab. So we talked about moves that go low, right? Now, let's talk about moves that go high. Let's look at Dhalsim's jab. Alright. So, let's slow it down to slow-mo. We can see that Sim's jab doesn't go very horizontal. It's not really long, but it has a fast startup, and it has red up here. So maybe this move is pretty good at anti-airing, right? So say we jump at him, right? This move will hit up there, the shape of it, right? So if we jump at Dhalsim here, and he jabs at the right time, probably gonna have to jump again, he'll clip us. He'll clip us right out of the air with that red up above his head, right? Come on, Sim. I believe in you. The timing. Dalsim. There we go. See how that red hit us? Right? So we can look at the shape of his, we can look at the shape of his jab and just infer that, like, oh, okay, that might be an anti-air move, right? We can also look at the frame data and go, oh, it's pretty fast. This jab is fast. Ah, okay, this must be a reactionary anti-air, right? Similar to, let's look at Ken's medium Shoryuken here. If we perform medium Shoryuken, oops, if I can get this to go, there we go. We can see that that red goes way above all that green. So this is an excellent anti-air attack. Because if we look at air moves, similar to ground moves, they have all the same things. They have the proximity box, they have hurt boxes and hit boxes. If we look at aerial moves, we'll see all the same features as ground moves. Right? So, looking at this, let's say Ken's jump light kick. Okay, what could we use this move for? Well, it hits up. It's an air move. It has pretty fast startup. Maybe air to air. This is not a good move to jump in with because look at how high that red is. It's going to take forever for us to get to this guy, right? But if we look at, say, Ken's jump hard kick, right? Okay, that red is pretty low. That's probably a better jump-in move. Or his jump medium kick. Wow, that's a long-ass red hurt box, or red hitbox, I mean. Maybe we can cross up with that move, right? Because it goes so far deep back into Ken here. These are things you can... you just look at the hitboxes and hurt boxes. You can just tell, right? Once you have a general familiarity with this. Sim's medium punch. Okay, we'll look at Sim's medium punch, and then we'll talk about the other type of hitboxes and hurt boxes. Because there are other categories. They have all the same fundamental principles as the ones we were talking about. They're just different classes. So let's look at Sim's medium punch. Pretty much the same story, similar story as his hard punch, right? Oops, I got the wrong playback on. So let's look at Dalsim's semi. See the proximity block box? There's his hitbox and his hurt box. So this is lingering. We can punish this, and it's pretty fat. It doesn't go to the floor, but it's pretty low. Okay, so we could jab. We could medium punch, right? We just need things that will hit in that area. Oh, I was mistimed there. My active frames are already done. He hit me out of my recovery, right? We could crouch hard punch. If I can get this, boom, right? We can even do something like, hey, wait a minute. Look at the hitbox on Ken's light hurricane kick. This is what there are a lot of people who don't understand this about this matchup. You see that? You see how Ken's light hurricane kick takes up that medium area on the screen? Here, let me even remove the camera so we can see it better, right? You see how... Look at exactly where Ken's medium hurricane goes, right? Look at the shape of this move. All right. See how it, or light hurricane, I'm sorry. You see how it covers that medium distance? That medium level, I guess you could say, on the screen, like that space, the shape of it, right? The shape of that move. Now let's look at that. Like, keep that in your mind. Keep the shape of that medium or that light tatsu in mind. Now look at Sim's medium punch. Oh, snap. Ken's light hurricane kick. Wait a minute, that has 3 frames of startup. So it gets to the active frames really fast. And it has a ton of active frames because the move spins around. Hey, wait a minute. This is probably a really good whiff punish against Sim. But isn't it really minus on block? Well, when Sim is probably going to be throwing these normals, we're not going to be right in his face. He's not going to use the extendo limb. He's not going to use sim limbs right when we're in his face, right? So this is just going to whiff. So, hey, wait a minute. This is godlike versus sim because it knocks him down. Oh, snap. We're plus on knockdown as Ken. Okay. Okay. Even if he does medium kick, even if Dalsim spams medium kick, right? We can this still has sim limbs. See how that green is right there? Right? And the red doesn't go outside of the green and it lingers around, right? When someone says, "Oh, that's a sim limb," this is what they mean. They mean it has a shitty hitbox hurtbox ratio, right? I mean the green is always around the red doesn't stick out, right? And it lingers around. So wait a minute. This is a sim limb? We can light hurricane kick again. Oh, we're plus. Doesn't this look, if you didn't know about hitboxes and hurtboxes, doesn't this look like absolute unga bunga, just, I'm playing Ken. Tatsumaki, right? Like, I'm playing Ken Masters. Doesn't that look super unga bunga? But now that we know about hitboxes and hurtboxes, this is obvious. This is obviously the optimal solution to whiff punish because not only is it extremely fast, we get Okazeme, right? Similar to how you'll see Ken and Ryu players, they'll uppercut sim limbs, they'll DP a sim limb, right? That's because of the shape, right? The shape of the uppercut. Look at the shape of Ken's light uppercut here, right? You see how that red is really far forward and there's no green there? So if we space this properly, right? If we space this just right, we can almost reactionarily, very reliably, hit this sim limb, right? Boom! Oh, sim got knocked down. We get close. And we all know that Dalsim is not super powerful up close unless he's the one taking the initiative. So, knowing about hitboxes and hurtboxes, things that previously looked like the Dark Unga are suddenly revealed to us to be calculated or calculatable and wise decisions in some instances. Falk and Poison in Street Fighter V also have sim limbs. This is true. Falk, much less so. But yeah, Poison has basically sim limbs on her whips, right? So what seems like, oh, okay, so wait a minute, our light hurricane kick has special move priority, which means that it will even beat heavy attacks. So if Sim is going to constantly throw these limbs, this is a 3-frame startup, high active frame, difficult for Sim to punish at a distance. He can punish it, but it is difficult for him to get anything really good, right? Because he's Sim. We have to know a little bit more about the matchup than just the shape of the moves. So we have a fast startup, a lot of active frames, high priority move that we can use, which hits at the perfect height. It has the perfect shape to get rid of these, to counter poke these sim limbs. So maybe in this matchup, when you see Ken just throw out Light Tatsu, armed with this knowledge, we know that, oh, wait a minute, this is just something versus Sim. I'm a little too close here. Like, oh, this is just a counter Sim strategy. This is a counter Dalsim strategy. In fact, not the Dark Unga, right? This is the same thing as that famous Daigo clip where he whiff punishes Dalsim's hard punch from mad far away. Same concept, right? When you see Ryu and Ken players uppercut from mad far away, they're not just doing it. They know the shape of the hitboxes and the hurtboxes, and they're using that as a whiff punish or counter poke against Sim. They also know that Dalsim has a hard time getting across the screen extremely quickly. In Street Fighter V, he can teleport, which is kind of fast, but it's not that fast. So if you do something that has high recovery from over here, Dhalsim generally has a tricky time getting to you, right? So these moves, because we know about the hitboxes, the hurtboxes, we know about the recovery, these moves are actually godlike versus him. Just throw out light Tatsu as Ken. All right, let's talk about the different. I'm starting to rant a little bit there. Let's talk about the different types of hitboxes and hurtboxes. Okay, so we know that red is a hitbox, and we know that green is a hurtbox, right? So if red touches green, you take damage. Somebody gets put in block stun or hit stun, or they take damage, right? So if red touches green, someone gets put in block stun or hit stun, right? Now, check out this fireball. Check out this fireball. You see how it's orange, right? That just means that this is a projectile, right? This is a projectile move. You see how it's orange, right? If you had a move that was projectile invincible, if it was listed as projectile invincible, like let's look at Ken's let's look at his heavy uppercut, right? Here we can see on FAT that it is strike and projectile invincible from frames 3 to 6, right? So if that move if this orange were to go over that move when it's projectile invincible, it wouldn't contact it. They would just pass over each other like ships in the night, right? So you have some moves that go around or avoid projectiles, right? So orange is a projectile box, right? So if we performed a projectile invincible move, it wouldn't do anything. So for example, if we're Ken and V trigger 1, right? Let's put on Ken's V trigger 1, and we can see how now when we're in V trigger 1, right? He has different properties and stuff. We can see that his hurricane kicks, right, start as a hit. Hey, wait a minute, that's orange. You saw that? You saw how that was orange, right? Let's restart that and run it back. Let me speed this up. Hey, subscriber, Spider Manga. Thanks, man. I see you. Thank you. Thank you. Big appreciation. I hope this information can be useful to you. Thank you for the subscription. I really appreciate that, man. Enjoy your almond milk emote and your eye drop face emote. Okay, so you see how this move right here is orange? That's a projectile. So if Dhalsim did a projectile invincible move, this would not hit him, right? So let's pretend this is Zangief. Let's just think about Zangief. You know how Zangief has a lariat, right? He can lariat you. Ooh, I just hit my desk really hard. Ooh. You know how Zangief can lariat? Hey, wait a minute. Maybe if we're trying to get a cheesy way in, it's not a good idea to do this at Zangief because he's projectile invincible when he lariats. And that changes the matchup dynamic. Another example is, hey, wait a minute. Anyone who has a projectile invincible move can get around these. So maybe these are not good moves to start with, right? Because they're projectiles. Another type of hitbox, let's change this to V trigger 2, just see. That blue there, that's a throw. Throws are generally blue, right? So even command throws will be blue. If this overlaps with that blue line, you remember how we were talking about the collision box earlier? At the very beginning of this? If that overlaps with that blue, right? Dhalsim will get thrown. So check this out. right? You see my blue there, right? So I go through my startup of my throw, and then I have my active frames. The blue is the active frames of the throw. So if I get, let me try to space this. Maybe right here, I will still throw sim. You see that? Let's restart the battle here. Let's try to... So you can actually throw people from quite far away, right? Throw range in Street Fighter V is generally short, but you see all that blue? If that blue makes contact with this blue, he's going to get thrown. Oops, wrong buttons. Let's... Okay, just get an idea of the distance there. I'm stuck in recovery, so I cannot move. Remember that when you do a move, you commit to the animation. All right, so if I'm right here, I should not throw him, right? Let's look at the spacing. Nope, not even close. All right, so let's move a little bit closer, right? We're aiming to get our blue box over his blue box. Right here. Nope, still not even close enough. So, definitely right here, right? Yep. Okay. And then the final type of hitbox is this suction box. Let me speed it up a little bit so we can see the V-trigger activation. Here we go. Okay, you see this dashed box here? If Dalsim were to have any of his green in this, he will get sucked towards Ken's Shinryuken. Another good thing to note is that Ken's Shinryuken is projectile invulnerable. You see this red here, right? His hurt box is outlined in red now. This is on this tool. Now I will say that sometimes the colors are different, but generally we always stick to the green and red scheme, and the blue for throws, and the yellow for the push box. Generally, every game will do that, but this particular tool in Street Fighter V uses red to say that this is projectile invulnerable. Oh, that was very fast. I accidentally put the game at 38 times speed. So we'll see that if we get Dalsim to do his crouching hard punch, we'll see that it actually has a projectile invulnerable part on it. You came in late. What are the yellow boxes? So the yellow boxes we can demonstrate here with Dalsim's hard punch. Okay, let's restart the battle. So you see how Ken is not blocking? Even if I hold backwards, oops. If I hold backwards right here, Ken will not block, right? So you see how Dalsim's red extends, his red extends all the way down. It's a little tricky to see, but you see how that extends all the way down on the floor there? Not only is that a low attack, but if I'm not in this yellow, I'm not able to block. The game will not let me block, right? So here's a better way to explain it. That yellow that comes out there, those yellow boxes, those are what enable you to block. Those are the proximity boxes, the proximity block boxes. So if I do this, you see how Dalsim starts blocking even though he's never in danger of getting hit? Right? This is what the game enables you. This is how the game enables you to use hold back to block. If this yellow box overlaps your hurt boxes, your green box, it causes you to block. Or it enables you to hold back to block. That's important when you play neutral because you might want to say, oh, I want to prevent my opponent from moving. Let me just throw jab. Now they can't move backwards, right? Or something like that, right? Those are things to think about. Like, oh, I want to limit my opponent's movement. Oh, I want to restrict their space. So here's a basic example. Oh, I want to restrict my opponent's space right? I want to prevent them from moving horizontally. Well, my fireball, if I throw my fireball, right? Check this out. It puts a hitbox right here. It's a fireball type, right? Proximity block box. And if they try to move forward, they're going to overlap their green with my hitbox here. They're going to overlap their hitbox with my hitbox. So that's going to cause them to get hit in block stun or hit stun. And we know they can't move when they're in block stun or hit stun. So this is a great way to control the horizontal space and establish me going first, right? Me in the driver's seat, right? That's what makes projectiles so strong. Is not only you can't walk forward, but at some distances, right, you can't even walk back. They just pin you down. And the opponent gets to do whatever they want, because we know that because this fireball has so many active frames, it hits so far away. This is technically a meaty, right? Because it hits so late in the active frames, it makes us plus if we're really far away. So if we're really far away, we hit super late in our active frames. This is really, really meaty, and it's going to be really, really plus while taking care of horizontal spacing, preventing them from moving, right? Because once that yellow overlaps with their green, they cannot walk backwards, right? And if they walk forwards, they're going to have to deal with the hitbox. So this dominates horizontal space super well, especially if we can do it from far away. That's what makes projectiles good, right? Look at those hitboxes and those hurt boxes. Once again, the blues are throws. Orange is our projectiles. What else? We've talked about startup, active, recovery. We've talked about 60 frames per second. We've talked about hurt boxes, collision boxes, push boxes, hit boxes. We've gone over some of the different types of hit boxes. We talked about the shapes of moves and thinking about what is a good shape to hit different things, right? We've talked about active frames, recovery frames. I guess we can talk about cancelable moves, right? We can talk about cancelable moves. Can we show G's V-Trigger 1 V-Skill? Absolutely. So let's talk about special canceling moves, right? We probably should have addressed this earlier, but let's talk about this now. So we know that when you throw a move, like for example Ken's down medium punch, we go through startup, we touch them on active, and if it touches them, it causes them to be in a preset amount of hit stun or block stun, right? So because this move is not meaty, we are hitting on the first active frame, this move ends up being +2 on block, right? So we have 2 frames to act. We can control our character 2 frames before Dalsim can. He's stuck for 2 frames in that block stun animation, right? So we have 2/60ths of a second to do something. That's not a lot of time, right? Well, we know that, okay, we could do this, we could do our jab, because that's 4 frames. What's Dalsim's fastest move? Does Dalsim have... So wait, if we're +2, this takes 4 to start, right? This takes 4 to start. So basically, right here, before Dalsim can do anything, at all, there is a 2-frame gap to our active frames before we can hold Dalsim down again, right? So right here, there's a 2-frame gap between the active frames. Does Dalsim have a move that's 2 frames fast? Not really, no. He can't really do anything. So he just has to hold this or get hit, right? So we can do what's called a frame trap, right? We can do a block string. We can do a string of attacks, right? And if Dalsim tries to do anything, he will get trapped. He does not have enough frames to make an action, right? Even though there's a gap there, it's not a true block string. There's a gap there. It's a frame trap because Dhalsim cannot act fast enough, right? So you can see that some characters can do a move there that's 2 frames. Like Zangief could do super. So we couldn't frame trap Geef like that. But because Dhalsim doesn't have a move that's fast enough, we can frame trap Sim, right? This is important to know about frame data. So okay, we're +2, so we could do it again, but this move has a 6 frame startup, so that leaves a gap of 4, right? If Dhalsim had a move that was less than 4, if he has a move that's less than 4, or a move that is 4 startup and has a good priority because we're playing Street Fighter V, right? So if he can beat a medium with a 4 frame startup, we would end up trading with him on that frame trap. It wouldn't be as effective. It so happens that Dhalsim does not have a 4 frame move that's fast enough or high priority enough to beat that, but that's how that would work. Now, all right, we're +2. This kind of limits our options, though, right? Like we couldn't possibly do this. We couldn't trap him with Roundhouse, right? But can I watch a replay? Maybe. I'm a little short on time today, but maybe we'll be able to after this discussion about frame data and hitboxes. However, this move doesn't have to be +2. We can cut it short by special canceling it. You see how this move didn't go through the recovery frames? Right? You know how we have startup, active, and recovery? Right? We have to wait for it to recover before we can do our next move. If a move has a special cancel window, it's special cancelable, or it's cancelable at all, right? So let's look at frame assistant tool, right? Let's look at Ken's down medium punch. We can see that this is special cancelable, super cancelable, V skill cancelable, and both V trigger cancels, right? We can see that by using our resource here. So we have additional things, right? So what happens is instead of going through the recovery, this move has a set amount of frames, which are the cancel window. So I can't cancel the startup, but I can cancel this move on the active frames, right? So when I hit this move and Sim blocks it, I can cancel it on block, right? So there's a collection of frames here that are special cancelable. They're cancelable into super and V skill. So hey, wait a minute. Instead of having to wait to be +2, I can do this. I can run, right? It's still minus, but it's a lot less minus than waiting and then doing the raw run, right? You see how that's like -18, right? But this is only -6? You see that? That's because I canceled the recovery of that move. You remember how earlier we were talking about media attacks? It's a similar principle, right? So you see how Ryu in this example has a move that's 2 frames of startup, has 2 active frames, and puts his opponent in 7 total frames of stun, right? So we know that if we hit this meaty, if we hit this here, right, we would just be able to shift these 7 frames up. So it would start right here. So instead of being +1, 2, 3, 4, right, we would start right here. So we would get, it would be 1, 2, and then we would, excuse me, it'd be 1, 2, I'm so sorry. Basic arithmetic evades me. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? 7. There'd be another block over here. There'd still be 7. So instead of being plus 4, we'd be plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Because we'd be hitting meaty. All of this would get shifted over. Right? Well, now let's say this move got special canceled. Let's just pretend that Ryu could cancel this into nothing. Right? Like he could cancel it just into move. Right? It would effectively be the same effect. So instead of putting them into the block stun later on this top timeline, right? Instead of hitting them with this last move and having the 7 block stun go out to here, we would cancel the recovery and we would just get rid of these. Right? So if Ryu could special cancel this, right? Let's say his cancel window was from 2 to 5. If he special cancel this, as soon as he hit it, right, he'd be able to act again, right? So he can do things. So if he could cancel this into move, that'd be extremely powerful because he could make this move plus, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He'd be able to make this move plus 6 if he could just special cancel it right here because he would cancel out of the animation. He would cancel the recovery, right? However, Street Fighter V cannot cancel moves into just moving, right? But he can cancel them into, let's say, command run, right? That makes this less minus, or in other words, that makes this more plus, right? This is just doing this, so we're plus 2, right? And this takes 22 frames to be over with, right? So this is, right now, Ken is in a, after this, we do this as fast as possible without canceling. Ken is in a state of minus 20, right? But if we cancel it, right? We cancel it way early. Now he's only minus 6, right? So canceling moves can gain you more plus frames, right? It can gain you more plus frames. It can also make you more minus as well, depending on what the move is you cancel into, right? Like, for example, this move is plus 5 on hit, but our run takes 22, right? So if we just hit this move, if we just hit this without canceling, we're plus 5. We can act 5 frames before Dhalsim can, right? But if we cancel it, now we've committed to going through the 22, even though we get the advantage of the cancel window, right? It still leaves us minus. You can use a tool called SFV Sim to look at the specific cancel windows on moves. I'm not going to get into that right now because I am slightly pressed for time here, but you can look at the specific cancel windows for moves on a tool called SFV Sim. So you can just type that into your web browser, Google it, you'll find it. It's a great tool. The developer is also part of the community, available on Twitter and stuff like that. I'm not saying contact them or anything. I'm just saying they're cool. They're really cool. But on the resource we have here, Frame Assistant tool, we can see what we can cancel into, right? So instead of having to wait for the recovery of a move, if it is cancelable, we can skip the recovery. We can cancel the recovery into the startup of something else. So for an example here, let's look at Ken's V-Trigger 1. Let's look at Ken's V-Trigger 1. Hey, what's up, Kyra? I see you. Normally, Ken's Fireball is minus 8. Minus 8 on hit, especially if we're really close, right? This will be minus 8 on hit if we're really close. It's wigging out a little bit because of the slow motion, but this move is unsafe, right? But if we cancel it into our V trigger, we cancel it into Ken's V trigger 1, we cancel it mad early, and now it's plus. It's extremely plus. This is so plus, right? We can act way before Dhalsim can. So canceling moves can change the frame data, right? Like, for example, another example would be Ken's uppercut, right? Dhalsim is stuck in this recovery animation. He's knocked down, right? You see how Dhalsim, he can't control his character while he's knocked down, but Ken can, right? Well, if we can pop him higher up in the air by doing our target combo, it takes more time for Dhalsim to fall down, right? So we'd be more plus because he's stuck for more frames, right? So you can not only could we cancel this into that, but we can even eke out more frames by paying attention and canceling this move, this part of our target combo, right? So this is more plus than this is. What's up, David? I see you, man. Are we using a software to see the hitboxes? Yes, we are. We are using a tool called Frame Trapped Hitbox Viewer. You can Google it. You can Google FTV Hitbox Viewer, or you can Google Frame Trapped Hitbox Viewer. It has a very simple web page, very simple setup. You just kind of download some stuff. I will say that I recommend very highly against using this during a online match. Not only because it's kind of cheating, but also it can cause some connection issues if it happens to slow down your game or do something wonky. But this tool is excellent. It's great. It has tons of features. We talked about it at the beginning of the stream. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Where were we? We're talking about special cancels. Yeah, so you can... to cancel something, you basically skip the recovery of the move. And that can change... that can change how plus or minus you are. And depending on what that move does, right, the properties of that move, it can change things as well, right? What else? What else? Can Dhalsim stretch his meat? What's up, Teely? I see you. What's good? What else? We've talked about startup frames, active frames, recovery. We've talked about hitboxes, hurtboxes, the shape of moves, how to identify what moves are good counter pokes, what moves are good whiff punishes. We've talked about the different types of hitboxes and hurtboxes. We talked about special canceling. I think that kind of covers it, really. I think that quite covers most everything. We talked about even the resources we can use. Let's see. Let me open up the old web browser Rooski. Let's see. We talked about all of these. We talked about hit stun and block stun. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, we got to look at G's V trigger. V trigger 1, right? Let's load that up. We'll look at that hitbox. We'll look at this. Where is G?
Let's go.
Yo, I see you, Teely. What's good? Thanks for the subscription, my guy. Yo, big respectable. 3 months, we out here. Enjoy the eye drop face and the milk. Soon to come is the duck emote. Please look forward to that. All right, let's look at G. Alright. So let's look at this projectile. Oops. How do you do it? How do they do this? Ah, yes. We don't even need to we don't even need to use slow motion to look at how ridiculous this is. Right? So let's use our knowledge, let's use our learned knowledge of hitboxes and hurtboxes to determine if this is a good move or not. Right? So let's look at this move. All right, let's slow it down. Let's slow this down. Okay. The startup is kind of long, but we know that if this red touches any of this green, right, we're gonna take hit stun or block stun. This is a projectile hitbox because it's orange. If this touches our green, we're gonna take hit stun or block stun. We know that this yellow box is what enables us to block, right? This is the proximity block box. So if we try to walk backwards after this overlaps our hurt box, we'll get stuck in place blocking. Right? Now, we could look to counter poke this move, but it doesn't seem to present any hurt box. He has no green for us to counter poke. So to deal with this move, we'd probably have to wait until he's in recovery and he presents some form of hurt box, right? However, we know that projectiles are extremely good at covering horizontal space, so we have to jump over this and punish his recovery. But his recovery is very low. The recovery on this is pretty low, which means if we jump even before the move is over, we're probably not going to get to him in time. Furthermore, this move is hella fat, right? Which makes it difficult to jump in on and jump over because the projectile travels at a pretty slow speed. So, overall, this move is really good. This move has very little downsides and almost only positives. We looked at a couple bad moves. Now this move is actually just ridiculous. That is a ridiculous move. I mean, compare that to anything else in the game. You're going to be hard pressed to find a move that's as good as this. However, check this out, right? We see that. Wait a minute, what are we looking for? Here we are. We see that this move doesn't come out immediately, right? And we know that Ken's V-Trigger 2, right? It doesn't move him forward very far, but it has this suction on it, right? You guys see that? The suction on that move? Oops. You see the suction on that move? So, hey, wait a minute. We do have a move to handle this, right? We can do that because this is projectile invulnerable, right? So when G does his V-Trigger, let me set this to infinite so we can just keep him doing it. When he does his V-Trigger, because we know about hitboxes and hurtboxes now, we can identify that Ken actually does have an option of this, right? He has an option to deal with this. He can use his Shinryuken move. Where can you find the frame data? Actually, one of the resources we're using and we've been talking about is called Frame Assistant Tool, right? If you have a smartphone, you have Android or iOS, you can look up FAT in the App Store, and you can get the app version of this. It has all the characters. It's really good, really useful. You can also look at the frame data online by going to, you can just Google FAT online, or you can go to fullmeter.com. Capcom also has an official frame data resource. However, it's not very good. I recommend FAT ride or die. Like FAT only. That's all you need, right? So the frame data is that frame assistant tool. It has all the characters. They update it regularly. The developers are great, part of the FGC. I mean, obviously, but they're active community members, stuff like that. Really recommend this resource. If you want to see the hitboxes and hurtboxes, you're either going to need to look them up online, or you're going to need to have a PC to run frame-trapped hitbox viewers. Excuse me. So, yeah, so even though at first broach, this move may seem impossible to deal with, since we know that Ken has this hitbox configuration on V-Trigger 2, right? This is a possible counter. Whether or not this counter is very good is going to depend on a lot of other factors in the matchup, right? But just looking at the raw hitboxes and hurtboxes, we know that this move is not only projectile invincible, but it goes really far forward without risking Ken's hurtbox and can pull people in, right? So, yeah, we could use this to counter his V-Trigger 1. Whether it's good or not depends a lot of other factors of the matchup, like when is Ken likely to have V-Trigger in this matchup? When is G likely to use V-Trigger 1? Is having V-Trigger 2 really going to discourage V-Trigger 1 so much that he's not going to do it? Or are you going to be able to build the V-Trigger? So, stuff like that. But just looking at the hitbox and hurtboxes, this move could handle that move. Very technically, you would use it as a counter poke, right? You would have to use it as a counter poke. You couldn't really whiff punish that move because you're not targeting his recovery. You're going to go first or at the same time. So you're either going to predictively throw this out, or you're going to go at the same time he's doing it. Not so much reactively, but more anticipatorially, right? Your reaction is primed with anticipation when you whiff punish someone. So technically, this would be a counter poke, but most people would say, "Oh, you just did that on reaction, right? You would just do it on reaction." I believe we've covered everything, right? Did we miss anything? Did we miss anything? I don't believe so. Yeah, we talked about startup, active, recovery, on hit, on block. We talked about special cancels. We talked about different types of hitboxes, hurtboxes, determining what's a good shape of hitbox, hurtbox, and how that depends on what move you're trying to use it against. We talked about the different types of hitboxes, hurtboxes. We went over some questions. We had some memes. We had some dreams. Seems about right. Does anybody have any further questions? Anything at all? We might have a replay to review if Mofosny is still hanging out. All right, that seemed to be it. We got about 20 minutes or so. This has been awesome. I'm glad to provide some form of information. I hope it can really be useful to you. Thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate the questions. I think for now though that will be it for me today. I'm gonna upload this. I'm just gonna cut the whole archive and load it up to YouTube later. But seeing as I only really have about 20 or so minutes to hang out, I think that's it for us today. So, as you can see on the screen here, I stream Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually till the time listed. Sometimes on Fridays we go over, but today had to be short because I need to talk to a man about some spectacles. But consistency is the name of the game here. I am always here. You can count on me. We play Street Fighter, other fighting games, play Tekken. There's quite a bit of League of Legends, sometimes a little World of Warcraft, Other times, other games. But always we're willing to talk about Street Fighter and discuss it, answer questions, any Street Fighter stuff you guys can think of. This is the place for it. Shout outs to everybody who came to hang out today. Really appreciate you guys. Shout outs to all the followers. Shout outs to the subscribers. Shout outs to Spider Manga. Shout outs to Tila. You guys are godlike. And that's it for today. Short stream, but I will be back on Monday. Please look forward to it. Catch you guys later. You guys have the best Friday, Thursday, whatever day it is, afternoon, morning, night, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Have the best possible time. See ya.